In the 1920s, a psychologist named Bluma Zagarnik was sitting in a bustling, smoke-filled diner in Vienna, and she noticed something that seemed almost impossible.
Okay.
She was watching these waiters manage massive, chaotic tables. We were talking like a dozen people with highly specific orders, drink substitutions, extra sides, and the waiters weren't writing a single thing down.
Wow.
Yeah, they were holding all of this incredibly complex data in their heads with perfect clarity. But the very second the customer paid the bill, the waiter's memory of that order wiped completely clean.
Just vanished.
It just vanished. If you asked them 5 minutes after the bill was settled what that table had eaten, they couldn't tell you.
Right.
So today on our deep dive, we are asking a pretty devastating question based on that exact mental glitch. What happens to a human brain when the bill for a first love is never actually settled?
It's a profound leap to make, right?
Mhm.
Taking an observation about a forgotten plate of schnitzel and applying it to the deepest scars of the human ego.
Yeah.
But that is exactly what we are exploring today. We're looking at a highly analytical, somewhat haunting framework presented in a YouTube short by the creator Hat Hut Hut Hut.
Right.
So the theory takes this proven psychological phenomenon, which is the brain's inability to let go of incomplete tasks, and uses it to explain the lifelong psychological burdens carried by men regarding their own unfulfilled potential.
So if the brain treats an unpaid diner tab like an open loop that burns cognitive fuel, what happens when that open loop isn't a cup of coffee, but like an entire relationship?
Well, that's the thing.
I want to get into the pure mechanics of this first, because Hut 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 anchors this entire philosophy on what is now known as the Zeigarnik effect. Why is the brain so utterly obsessed with incompletion?
Right.
It seems like an incredibly inefficient way to operate, just holding on to everything that isn't finished.
It might seem inefficient now, but if you look at it through the lens of evolutionary biology, it's actually a highly tuned survival mechanism.
Yeah.
In early human history, an unfinished task wasn't just an annoying item on a to-do list. It was a literal matter of life and death.
Oh, sure.
Like if you were building a shelter and you get distracted before the roof is secure, a storm rolls in and you freeze. Or if you're tracking an animal for food and you lose the trail, your family starves.
Wow, yeah.
So the brain evolved to create this intense, irritating, unavoidable mental itch regarding anything left undone. It floods your system with a low-grade cognitive tension.
So it's actively punishing you for leaving things open, like it's holding your attention hostage until you finish the job.
Precisely. The brain allocates an enormous amount of metabolic energy to maintain a state of readiness, essentially holding its breath, preparing you to act. But once the task is completed, once the shelter's built, or in the waiter's case, once the bill is paid, that tension is biologically commanded to release.
Right, right.
The cognitive resources are freed up, and the memory is discarded because holding on to it no longer serves any survival purpose.
So what Hat Hut Hut does in this video is point out the tragedy of this mechanism misfiring in the modern world. Our brains are applying the same intense life or death cognitive tension to abstract emotional concepts.
I bet.
I want to make sure we're really grounding this for the listener, because the leap from building a shelter to emotional trauma is steep.
Very steep.
It almost feels like a phantom limb syndrome for the ego. The relationship is severed, the situation is practically over, but the brain keeps sending distress signals to a part of your life that is already gone.
Yeah.
And simply because it didn't get a neat biological resolution.
That phantom limb comparison actually gets to the neurological heart of it. When a limb is amputated, the brain's somatosensory cortex still expects input from that missing arm or leg.
Right.
And when it doesn't get it, it generates pain. The Zeigarnik effect in an emotional context works very similarly. The brain expects the closure of a narrative.
Wow.
And when it doesn't get that closure, it generates a psychological ache. It refuses to let the neural pathway degrade. And this brings us to the core thesis of the Hat Hut 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 video, which is summarized in one incredibly sharp observation. A finished task dissolves, an unfinished one burns forever.
A finished task dissolves, an unfinished one burns forever. That is a brutal way to look at memory.
It really is.
But applying this to romance, I have to stop you there because I'm struggling to buy into this entirely. It sounds incredibly cynical.
How so?
Well, we usually think young love fails because people just grow apart, or they move away for college, or they just realize they aren't compatible.
Sure.
Are we really saying, based on this framework, that it boils down to a man looking in the mirror and saying, I don't have enough money or power?
It does sound cynical if we cling to the standard Hollywood narrative of romance. But Hut 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 is intentionally stripping away that romanticization to look at the underlying power dynamics of early adulthood.
Okay.
The argument here isn't that love doesn't exist. The argument is about why the failure of that specific first love leaves a permanent psychological scar. The video references the Netflix series Notes from the Last Row, specifically focusing on a concept described as the boy's inferiority.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah. So according to this theory, a man's first love often occurs at a time when he has absolutely no leverage in the world. He has no financial stability, no social status, no proven track record of competence.
So he is basically a walking reservoir of unproven potential. But, potential doesn't pay the rent or offer security.
Right. And crucially, and this is the hinge of the entire theory, he is acutely aware of his own lack.
Oh.
The failure of the relationship in this context isn't chalked up to star-crossed lovers or bad timing. Those are comforting lies we tell ourselves to absolve our egos.
Yeah.
In this framework, the failure of the relationship is empirical, undeniable proof of his powerlessness. He couldn't sustain the relationship because he wasn't enough yet.
So the open loop, the unpaid bill that the brain is obsessing over, isn't actually the loss of the girl. The open loop is his own failure to be a man of substance. The relationship is just the mirror reflecting his inadequacy back at him.
You've hit the exact nerve of the theory. The task he failed to complete wasn't maintaining a romance. The task he failed was self-actualization.
Wow.
Because the relationship ended on the note of his own deficit, the brain logs this as a catastrophic failure of survival. Going back to our evolutionary analogy, it's not just that he lost the deer.
Right.
It's the realization that he doesn't even know how to hold a spear. That is a terrifying realization for a young ego, and the brain refuses to let that loop close until the deficit is corrected.
So the tab remains permanently open, just burning cognitive fuel.
Yeah.
So if the brain is screaming for the psychological bill to be settled, how does the mind actually cope with that? Because you can't just go back in time and hand your 20-year-old self a bank account and a high-status career.
No, you can't.
According to the video, this intense deficit activates what is referred to as the hunter within. The man basically sets out on a lifelong mission to close the loop through external success.
Yes, it triggers a massive compensatory drive.
Yeah.
What we're looking at is an attempt to retroactively solve a problem from the past using the tools of the present.
Right.
The logic of the hunter is straightforward, if flawed. It's like, I lost because I lacked power. Therefore, if I acquire absolute power, wealth, and status, I will finally balance the equation.
Oh, I see.
I will prove that I'm enough, and this burning loop will finally dissolve.
But the video outlines two divergent paths for this hunter, and they both seem completely inescapable.
Yeah, they are.
Let's look at the first one, which Hot Hat Hut calls the winner's tragedy. This is the scenario where the compensatory drive actually works on a material level.
Yep.
The guy grinds for 20 years. He builds the company. He gets the wealth, the impressive title, the social dominance. He climbs to the absolute peak of the mountain.
Sure.
But the video argues that when he gets there, the overriding emotion isn't satisfaction or closure. His thought as he looks back is simply, if only I'd had this then.
This is where we have to understand the mechanics of how memory encoding works in the brain. External achievements, like the bank account, the corner office, the cars, they're occurring in present-day reality.
Yeah.
But the cognitive loop he is trying to close is neurochemically trapped in the past. To use your earlier metaphor, he is trying to hand $1 million check to a waiter who clocked out a decade ago.
Oh, wow.
The restaurant has been demolished. The external achievements cannot reach backward through time to soothe the original wound of inadequacy.
It's like pouring water on a fire that burned out 20 years ago while completely ignoring the smoke damage that's still in the walls.
That's a great way to put it.
He wins the game, but he realizes the prize doesn't fit the original lock.
Exactly. The hunter realizes he's been chasing a ghost. The Zeigarnik effect doesn't care about his current net worth because the specific task that was left unfinished, being enough for her in that exact moment in time, remains forever incomplete.
Which brings us to the second path, the loser's tragedy. This is the man who doesn't conquer the world. He reaches middle age without the wealth, without the power, perhaps broken and defeated by the realities of life.
Yeah.
And according to Hot Hut Hut, as this man looks back, his defining thought is, if I'd only won her, everything would have turned out right.
In psychological terms, this is a profound form of scapegoating. In this scenario, the man's failure to achieve worldly status magnifies the initial wound.
Okay.
Because he never acquired the tools to even attempt to retroactively close the loop. The unfinished task of the first love becomes the foundational myth of his own ruin.
Oh, jeez.
He convinces himself that the initial open loop is the root cause of every subsequent failure.
So he's rewriting history to protect his ego in the present. Instead of admitting he made bad investments or didn't work hard enough or just had bad luck, he says, my life fell apart because I lost my soulmate.
Precisely. It is a defense mechanism. It is much easier to blame a tragic romanticized loss in your youth than it is to face the compounding failures of your adulthood. Right. If he had just settled that first bill, he tells himself, the rest of his life would have been a cascading success story.
The symmetry between the winner and the loser is just haunting. Whether he wins the game of life or gets completely crushed by it, every road loops back to the exact same mental starting line.
It really does.
But why doesn't success overwrite the failure? If neuroplasticity is real, shouldn't 20 years of winning eventually rewire the brain to stop caring about one loss at age 20?
You would think so.
Yeah.
But neuroplasticity requires the new experiences to directly challenge and replace the old beliefs.
Okay.
The problem here is that the man's success isn't challenging the old belief. It's entirely built upon it. His success is a reaction to the trauma of inadequacy. Every time he closes a huge business deal on a subconscious level, he's doing it to prove the ghost wrong.
Yeah.
Therefore, the success actually reinforces the importance of the original wound. It keeps the neural pathway of that first failure highly active.
If that's the baseline, if neither immense wealth nor utter ruin can resolve this open loop, what is actually happening inside his head?
Yeah.
We arrive at what I think is the most devastating realization in this entire framework. The argument is that over time, the woman from his past entirely ceases to be a human being in his memory.
That's right.
She is stripped of her actual personality, her flaws, her reality. She transforms into what the video calls a ledger. She becomes the sterile metric by which he measures the entire worth of his life.
The use of the word ledger is a brilliant piece of psychological translation. Think about what a ledger actually is. It has no emotion.
Right.
It is an objective tool used in accounting to record debts and assets, profits and losses.
Yeah.
By turning the memory of his first love into a ledger, Hut is suggesting the man is trapped in a permanent state of self-auditing.
So what does this daily audit actually look like in practice? How does a man use a ghost as an accounting tool?
What happens in the quiet moments of comparison? Like when he gets a promotion, he unconsciously logs it as an asset against the initial debt of his youth.
Wow.
When his marriage hits a rough patch, he logs it as a deficit, comparing his current complex reality to the idealized, unfinished fantasy of the past.
Yeah.
The ledger is never balanced because the original debt, the crushing realization of his early inadequacy, was recorded in an emotional currency that no longer exists.
It's like she isn't the book he actually wants to read anymore. She's just the permanent bookmark holding the exact page where his potential was paused.
That's a perfect analogy.
He keeps opening the book to stare at that bookmark, but he's not reading the text. He's just obsessing over the fact that his story got interrupted right when he felt the most powerless.
That is exactly how the mechanism operates. And this leads to the ultimate twist of this philosophy.
Right.
It was never really about her.
Right.
The haunting, the Zeigarnik effect, the burning loop, it isn't about the specific individual woman he lost. It is always exclusively about the version of himself he never got to be.
A man stays forever haunted, not by the love he lost, but by the man he wasn't. When you frame it that way, it shifts this from a tragic romance into a psychological horror story about self-actualization.
It completely dismantles the standard narrative. Society conditions us to view these stories as bittersweet romances, like the one that got away.
Yeah.
But what is proposed here is that the mourning isn't for the relationship at all. The mourning is for the unactualized self. The boy who was too weak, too poor, too insignificant to hold on to his place in the world.
Wow.
That boy is the ghost haunting the adult man.
And because that boy's story ended in failure, the task remains unfinished. It burns forever. While all the successes he has today, the completed tasks, the closed deals, the acquired wealth, they just dissolve. They don't burn. They don't keep him up at night because they are finished. It really forces you to audit your own motivations. Are the things you're chasing today actually for your current self, or are you just trying to settle a bill for a version of yourself that died 20 years ago?
That is the ultimate trap of the hunter within. You can spend a lifetime hunting a phantom, only to realize the forest was empty the entire time.
Man. Okay, well, if we zoom out on this entire framework, and we are moving into our final 3 minutes here, so I really want to synthesize all of this for the listener, what we're really looking at is a 3-act tragedy driven by a cognitive glitch, exactly as Hut laid it out.
Right.
So Act 1 is the open loop. It's the Zeigarnik effect in action. Just like the waiter who can't forget an unpaid bill, the human brain refuses to let go of an unfinished task. But in this case, the unfinished task is a young man's first love, which fails not due to destiny, but due to his own glaring lack of status, money, and power. The loop that stays open is his crushing realization of his own inadequacy.
Exactly.
Then Act 2 is the false hunt. This is the compensatory drive where the hunter within tries to fix a past emotional deficit with present-day material tools.
And we saw how that goes.
Yeah, and we saw how this is a rigged game. If he becomes wildly successful, he looks at his wealth and is crushed by the thought, if only I had this back then.
Right.
If he fails in life, he uses the lost love as a scapegoat, whispering, if I had only won her, I wouldn't be a failure now. Success and ruin both lead back to the exact same unhealed wound.
It's unavoidable.
And finally, Act 3 is the ledger. This is the realization that the ghost he is chasing wasn't the girl at all. He transformed her memory into a sterile accounting tool to measure his own worth.
Yeah.
Ultimately, he isn't haunted by losing her. He is haunted by the inadequacy of the boy he was and the shadow of the man he never got to be.
It is a meticulously constructed, almost surgical dissection of the male ego.
Okay.
But if we follow the strict logic of this creator's own text to its absolute limit, it leads us to one final, perhaps even more unsettling thought to leave you with.
Okay.
The core premise of the video is that a finished task dissolves, while an unfinished one burns forever.
Right.
Therefore, we have to ask the inverse question. What if he had possessed the money and power back then?
Oh, wow.
What if there was no lack, no inadequacy, and he had successfully won his first love, marrying her and building a life together?
Yeah, what then?
If the relationship had been a completed task, devoid of that agonizing tension of inadequacy, would she have eventually lost all her meaning to him?
Oh, man.
If they stayed together, would the memory of her and the intensity of that early love have simply dissolved into the mundane nothingness of daily life, exactly like the waiter forgetting a paid bill?
That's dark.
Perhaps the haunting, the pain, and the unfulfilled potential are the exact and only things that give his memories their immortal power.